Hoi, it's louisity again, and for this reading vlog, we are going to read The Spirit Glass by Roshani Chokshi. Hooray! So this is the first book that I'm reading from Roshani Chokshi that is outside of the Pandava or the Aru Shah series, and you folks know that I really love the Pandava series, the Aru Shah series. Overall, I'm raving about the series and the books that consists of it. And this book is like another like historical, no, not historical fantasy. It is fantasy. Okay, I was kind of like mixing it up with her other book that I think is catered to adults. But I noticed that when like the RR is like at a gold medal, I do think that this means that this is like intended for like preteens or middle grade. So this is like a middle grade fantasy book inspired by Philippine mythology, pre-colonial Philippines. So definitely I'm eager how Roshni is going to be able to flush out those elements in this book. So yeah, definitely eager. As far as I've read, it does mention about Babai Lans. So yeah, that is something that I look forward to reading this one. And let's get started and read this one. I'll catch you folks later. Whoa. I don't know if you folks can hear it, but like it is stormy here in the Philippines at the moment that I'm filming this clip. So hopefully everybody is going to be safe, in their respective homes or wherever they are. I am safe. My family is safe so far, and will be safe all along. So yeah, hopefully, like what one of the songs said, no storm lasts forever. So yeah, proof of safety right over here. And I'm going to be giving you a reading update of Spirit Glass by Roshani Chokshi. Now, I'd have to say that some of the things that I noticed that needs to be worked on would have to be like, there's a part here that was a bit confusing to me in terms of the setting. I really thought that I was like in the Philippines when I was reading this, but it was set in Atlanta, and there's just like Philippine inspired like settings and all that, kind of like fusing the magical world and of course what it's like being in Atlanta, Georgia. That confused me a bit. What else? In terms of the pace, the build-up was a bit slow. For some reason, I didn't feel like, if it weren't for like the Filipino, like things that were mentioned here, like the food, like the expressions, like the words, it's like I wouldn't be that invested in terms of the world. Like, there's something about it, like, because usually like the first few pages tend to like try to like captivate you and get really immersed with the world, and I felt like it lacked at that part until the time where the soul key got stolen from Corazon, and that's when things like started really revving up. And that's when you start to really immerse yourself with the narrative. There was something about it, like the early scenes, that just didn't really mesh with the overall narrative. It was just like, okay, one day is this, okay, we went here, we had sorbetes, like that. It was a little too flat, especially that this is going to be like a fantasy book. If it was contemporary with a little bit of a fantastical elements, maybe that's could be something that I would consider, and maybe it would hit the mark. And maybe, I don't know if that's what Roshni's trying to go for, but yeah, in terms of a fantasy, that's not like how a fantasy work has to be done in terms of like the pace. So yeah, that like fell flat for me. But the Anito Sasa was really cute. The characterizations were really well. But yeah, like some of the parts about the characterizations didn't really add spice to the overall plot or the pace of the narrative, basically, of this book. Yeah, until like the soul key part. So yeah, I'm still thinking if it's gonna rev up towards like the succeeding books, and that's like the challenge of writing like a standalone fantasy. And I do hope that this is gonna remain as a standalone. I'm gonna consider it as a standalone, even if it will have sequel books. Okay, but yeah, I'm just like thinking about, because this is gonna be like about like 300 pages. It's really a challenge to make it concise and at the same time build everything. And who knows, I'm trying to recall on top of my head if I read like a standalone book that, was able to sum up everything, um, yeah, I think that's a challenge. But yeah, so far it is vibes, a bit of plot, but not as immersive as how I expect it to be. So we'll see if, throughout the next succeeding pages, if this will, catch up, and let's see what will be my rating. So yeah, and we'll see if, you know, Corazon will be successful in getting back the Soul Key. So I'll catch you folks later. Well, I just want to get this out there. There's a lot of like references, like with some comparisons towards like pre-colonial and Spanish colonization era in the book, and it does talk about like some lands being taken away from farmers, which is something that's going to make you contemplate or brood. And you know what? Who Sasa reminds me of? He reminds me of Mushu from Lon. I just want to get that out there. So here's a reading update of The Spirit Glass by Roshani Chokshi. Now I finished more than 200 pages, and we are already at the scene where, Corazon was dealing with the Biniboods, with Leo and Sasso. And so far, we already got the 2 blessings from the Bakunawa, as well as the Diwata. And unfortunately I am not impressed. I think that the overall way of how the narrative or the plot was written was quite sloppy. There were like so many things that were like being discussed that kind of like is slowing the book for some reason. Knowing that this is like a standalone fantasy, I felt like as if I'm reading like a first book in a series. I don't know if this is going to be a series later on. Hopefully not, because I'm cool with it being like a standalone, because it is marketed as a standalone. But yeah, I felt like there were things there that just weren't smoothly done. Like the setting was really beautiful. The Philippine culture incorporation was very beautifully done. However, in terms of like the quest, like some of the flashbacks, some of like the additional context were just like kind of, I felt like they were randomly inserted, we get to encounter the whirlpool and like the wave that just like, that was cute, that was like fun, but like it felt like I was reading like an anthology of like Philippine folklore as opposed to like reading like a quest. And I don't know, like there was just something about the narrative, the plot, that just didn't really like pop out. It was like I get like what's happening within the scenes itself, but in terms of like looking back about like the progress of the quest, it just didn't make, like it wasn't clear, it wasn't vividly done. Sometimes flashbacks could be done well to like really explain the context. In this case, some of the flashbacks here were just kind of like randomly inserted, and they were kind of like too long for it to be like inserted, that they could be their own story, and be expounded from there. So yeah, it just didn't really work well so far. Now I'm like less than 100 pages, like I'm less than, there are less than 100 pages left, for me to read. So we'll see how that will go, because yeah, so far in terms of the plot, like how the quest is going, like I understand what's happening. It just lacked how, how it really, like it was just kind of like the way it was synthesized was a mess. So yeah, we'll see how this will end, and if things are gonna get better towards like the end. I mean, there are profound things, some things to like contemplate about in the story, but yeah, I felt like it wasn't how a novel, let alone a fantasy novel, a middle grade slash preteen novel should be written, or even like a young adult, or basically, like I said, like as a novel written. So, yeah. So I just finished reading Spirit Glass by Roshani Chokshi, and have to say that it ended pretty, decently. Like the latter parts were quite decent. I like how it tackled about grief, about like moving on, and I really hope with that ending that this will stay as a standalone, and I would always consider this as a standalone novel. But yeah, as I mentioned in the other clips, like even if this like ended pretty well, or decently, the narrative is just like sloppy. As much as you can tell that Roshani did her research and she indicated like her sources for like the Philippine references for this book, I felt like it was more like, here's what I've researched, here's what I found. It lacked the magic or the soul or the spark of the story. I just felt like, these are the things about about Philippine folklore, and like that's pretty much it. So yeah, it's like it was able to catch up towards the end, with the profound messages that were like mentioned here. And yeah, it is quite gloomy though, so be cautious about that, especially if you're going over grief. I don't know if like this would be the best. Maybe for some people it might help in terms of moving on, but yeah, just be cautious that it tackles about grief. Okay, so yeah. But nevertheless, it's just really the narrative, like from like the beginning towards like the middle. The quest wasn't like polished that clearly, and it lacked the soul or magic or spark that I'm expecting, let alone for a fantasy middle grade preteen or even a fantasy young adult novel. So with that being said, I'm giving this book 2.75 out of 5 stars. Let me know down your comments down below about Spirit Glass, and feel free to comment down below if you are still interested in reading The Spirit Glass despite my reading experience. And if you've made it this far, leave a red circle emoji. So I hope you folks liked this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Also click that subscribe button and hit that little bell icon somewhere down there to keep yourselves posted about my videos. And also put down links and handles on my social media accounts, so feel free to check me out and follow me there and support me there as well. As always, thank you so much for watching. Always be thankful and unleash the reader in you. Bye y'all.